Hello, this is Robbie Mitchell here from Head in the Cloud Development. Today I'm going to walk you through how to take a legacy NetSuite bundle and convert it into a 2020.2 NetSuite SuiteApp using the Suite Cloud Development Framework. First, let's see if we can identify whether or not this is the right video for you to be watching. Perhaps you're like me and you have a handful of old Suite apps that currently exist as old legacy NetSuite bundles. If you'd like to get one of these apps converted to the new SDF structure so it can appear on the new Suite Apps tab in NetSuite, then keep on watching. I'm going to be working in WebStorm for most of this tutorial. And if you know me at all, you'll know that at Head in the Cloud we do all our coding in TypeScript, so I'll be showing you how to get your TypeScript scripts working with the SDF as well. If you prefer JavaScript, don't worry, you'll still find this totally helpful. Okay, let's get to it. First, let's talk about what we're going to do here. I have an old bundle here that I call SuiteSign that's been around for 5 years or so. It essentially allows users to add a hand-drawn signature to transactions, like this. I'm loading a quote here that I'll sign. So here we have a Sign PDF button. And here I just have a signature panel that I can draw any signature on. And when I click Sign, it adds it onto the PDF printout to be sent to the customer. So let's look at the components of the bundle. The list is pretty basic, a few scripts, one custom record, and a couple of custom fields. This should serve as a perfect example for converting to an SDF SuiteApp. Now let's look at the existing code for just a second. I wasn't as organized as I am now when I originally did this, so all the code for this bundle is hanging out in the middle of a larger repository, which really isn't the best place for it. So again, to recap, what we're going to do now is recreate this bundle as an SDF SuiteApp. So step one, if you haven't already, is to install the NetSuite Suite Cloud IDE plugin. You can do this from Preferences and Plugins in WebStorm. You'll see it here, the Suite Cloud IDE plugin by NetSuite. Next, go to File, New, Project, and choose SuiteApp. Now this part is important. This is where you enter the details for the SuiteApp. I'm going to set the location to be a folder called SuiteApp Signature in my Documents folder. My publisher ID is com.headintheclouddev. And for the project ID, I have to think about it because I know that NetSuite won't like it if I continue to call this app SuiteSign. So instead, I'm going to name it something a bit safer. I'll set the project ID to be HITC Signature. And I'll set the project name to be Signatures for NetSuite. Now the old version of this app is currently at 2.5.3, so we'll make this one version 3.0.0. Okay, here it is. So first let's expand this directory structure to see what we're working with. So first things first, let's copy our old scripts into the new folder. I'm just going to drag and drop them in. And I'll mention that now is a good time to rename the files if you want to update them to something perhaps more standardized. I'll rename mine to start with HITC_signature_. Now to get our TypeScript set up and running, first we need to add a very simple package.json file. We just need to add a couple of dev dependencies here for our SuiteScript TypeScript mapping and TypeScript itself. When you save this file, you should get a pop-up where you can click Run npm install. Next, we need to add a tsconfig.json file to set our TypeScript compiler preferences. I'm going to copy and paste this in from another repository. Just make sure lines 16 and 19 have your project folder set correctly. Note that we have a build folder on the end of this folder. That's where our JavaScript files will go. So now I should be able to generate my JavaScript files just by running tsc to compile the TypeScript. Oh look, I got some errors about needing jQuery, which makes sense since my project uses jQuery. So I better add that into my package.json file. After I do that and run tsc again, let's see what happens. Great, all clear, and here are my JavaScript files. Next, we need to update our deploy.xml to tell it to include the JavaScript files rather than the TypeScript files. Next, we need to connect WebStorm to your NetSuite account if you haven't already. To do this, right-click on your base directory and go to NetSuite, NetSuite Settings. Expand NetSuite, go to Account Management, and add your NetSuite account. And then in Project Settings, make sure to select that NetSuite account, and then click OK. Okay, now the next step is to download all the other bundle components from our NetSuite account. So from here, right-click on the Objects folder and go to NetSuite, Import Objects from Account. Now I like to do these one category at a time to make sure I get everything. So first I'm just going to get my custom record. And now I'll get my custom transaction body fields. And then I'll get my suitelets. And as you can see, I did not do a very good job at identifying these at first. Now finally, I'll get my user event script. Okay, so now our objects folder is populated with an XML file representing each of the objects we just imported. So now the next thing we need to do is start going through an iterative validation process. A wonderful feature of this SDF plugin is that it is very good at telling you what's wrong with your SuiteApp. Let me show you what I mean. We'll go ahead and run the validation process and see what it comes up with first. That didn't take long. So if you click on the SuiteCloud IDE tab, you'll see the results of what you've been doing. Now if we scroll in the results to the validation results, here we'll see a bunch of warnings. These warnings come from my custom transaction body field. It's telling me that because I have the body assembly build field set, I should specify in my manifest whether or not the assemblies feature is required. My field doesn't actually apply to assembly builds, so I'm just going to remove these fields from my custom field, and this should solve the problem. As you can see, this field really only applies to sales transactions at this point. So let's just remove everything else. Same thing with my other field. Now if I scroll down a bit, let's see what the next warnings are. Here's some about my custom record. It's telling me that the enabled list editing feature requires the extreme list feature to be enabled. Now I know that my bundle doesn't actually require that feature, so I'm going to add it into the manifest as not required. And this is how we do that. Here in the manifest, we'll add a dependencies object. And here we'll add each feature with a required attribute. Great, so this says that the extreme list feature is not required. Now the same thing actually goes for the mail merge and multi-language features. So let's do that as well. Looking at the next warning, it's about the CRM feature. Now I'm pretty sure my bundle probably does need CRM to be enabled, so I'm going to note that here as a required feature. Now if I scroll down to the end of the warnings, next we'll see the actual errors. Now here we see some features that should definitely be required. Custom records and server-side scripting. So let's add those in here. Now I also see here that there's an invalid file path. This makes sense since we renamed our files and we have them in a new directory structure. So let's update these paths. Okay, now let's run validation again and see what it comes up with next. Oops, I actually have an error in my manifest file. Within dependencies, you actually need a features list, like this. Now I'll put my features in here. Sorry about that. Okay, let's try again. Okay, now it's showing me that I have an error on my user event script deployment because the required parameter is empty. I'm just going to delete these deployments because these are really something that should be set up by users after installing the bundle. Let's validate again. Okay, now the next big thing to talk about. A big thing to realize when converting an old bundle is that you're not actually replacing the old bundle, you're creating a new one. This means that you need to come up with new IDs and stuff for your objects so that they can coexist on the same NetSuite account. Look on the bright side though, you're probably much more experienced now than you were when you originally created your bundle, right? So let's go through and update these IDs. There are two things you need to do as you update each one. First, you need to find all occurrences of the old ID and make sure you update them. I like to use the grep command for this. I'm going to rename this field custbody hitc underscore signature underscore data. And here I'll mention that these field IDs can be a maximum of 40 characters. And if you double-click the field ID and look down at the bottom right, you'll see WebStorm will show you how many characters it is. 28 characters is just fine. So when you change an ID, you need to also rename the file with that ID, like this. Now I see that this ID is used in my user event script, so I need to update it there. And it's also used in my configuration as a default value, so I'll update it there as well. Okay, let's do the next field. And next is my custom record. Oh, but first I need to rename this file. Okay. Next is this script. Now our second suitelet. And finally, our user event script. Okay, let's validate again. And no surprise here, the next step is to set new IDs for all our fields as well. And this is the fun part. Again, I need to find all occurrences of the field and update those too. Now if you're lucky, maybe you can do what I'm going to do here and just replace part of the field ID with something new. Here I'm converting underscore suite sign to underscore signature. Because if you notice, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fields that thankfully were named uniformly and thus can be updated uniformly. So I'll replace all these occurrences here. And then it looks like I need to do the same thing in my signature suitelet. There, that wasn't so bad. Let's validate again. Okay, there's one more, the ID of my suitelet script parameter. And let's validate again. Okay, now everything is passed. So let's go ahead and deploy this SuiteApp to my development account. This should only take a few seconds. Okay, now that that's done, we need to go into the account and actually create the bundle. So when you're creating the bundle, you should be able to select your SuiteApp from the list here. From there, the rest is pretty much the same as with regular bundles. Now notice that I didn't actually update the labels of my fields, so we get this little 2 next to them. That's an easy thing to update after this. Now a couple of things here. I want to make sure that my client script is available for the Suite bundler here, and I want to make sure my server-side scripts are hidden in the bundler. So I'm going to set those properties here in the UI. Now let's see if I can get my client script. There it is. Okay, great. Looks good. We'll go ahead and save the bundle. And from there, the rest is the same as with regular bundles. You may want to do some initial testing right in your dev account. Otherwise, you can copy it here from your development account to your deployment account and test from there. So this concludes our tutorial on converting to an SDF SuiteApp. Please get in touch if you have any questions or feedback. Otherwise, we'll see you at Suite World, hopefully.